everyone. We will just give it one more minute. We can see there's lots of people coming into the room. So we'll just give it 30 seconds, 1 minute, just to let more people join us, and then we will get started. So while we're waiting, it would be great if you could just use the chat and input your name and what institute you're dialing in from. It'd be good to see everyone and where you're from.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming along today. Also be great to know, are you working with accessibility directly, or if there's anything, a reason you've come along to this session in particular, something that you want to find out more about, that's great. We will have lots of opportunity throughout the session to ask questions as well.
Yeah, and I can see some people are putting in the chat there, which is awesome. So we'll there's lots of people coming in, so we'll just get started. So welcome to our, I can't even remember which number we're on of our Adobe Skills Lab series, but we've done a few so far. Is it number 4? Number 5?
I think it's 4, yeah.
4. So today's session we'll be looking at accessibility, and more specifically how to consistently create PDFs that are accessible for viewers with, for example, visual impairments, but also looking at how to remediate your inaccessible PDFs as well. So I'm joined with my esteemed colleague, Alistair Black. Alistair's actually going to be our presenter today, and Alistair and I do the same role here in the UK. We're both senior customer success managers. Alistair began his journey with Adobe, I think almost 20 years ago, Alistair, is that right?
Little more than that, Louise, actually.
Oh my gosh.
I hate to say it.
Don't look it. But Alistair started supporting Acrobat, and I think it's clear to say his passion for the product still remains today. He is our resident expert on accessibility, so I think we're really looking forward to him sharing his expertise in the session. Today's session is due to last 1 hour, and like all of our other sessions, we are recording them for future viewing. I know in previous sessions we've said that we were updating them in the document where you've registered for the session, but we're actually in the process of trying to put that onto a YouTube channel as well. So we'll be sharing more details of that in our upcoming newsletter. And what I'll do is, whilst Alistair starts, I'll put some of the links into the chat for you to subscribe to the newsletter and also to see any upcoming webinars that you might want to register for. And with that, like we've said previously, please use the chat, let us know where you're from, where you're coming from. As Alistair said, if there's anything specific that you're here for, you want to get out of the session, it would be good to hear that too, or any questions as well. As Alistair goes along, please pop them in there, and then I can stop Alistair and get any questions answered as well. So with that, I will stop talking because everyone wants to hear from Alistair, and I'll pass it over to him.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah, so welcome along, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about accessibility. Primarily, I'm going to be talking about Adobe Acrobat, but I am going to talk about a couple of other products as well. So Adobe Express, because we've got some really good new features in Express now for accessibility. And also, I'll be talking a little bit about some of the PDF services that are also available that will help you do some of these things at scale and on the larger scales. So first of all, why be accessible? So, well, the first answer is, well, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to make sure that everybody at your university or college is able to access all of the course materials, that they're able to access information about the university, and that they're able to have the full experience that they should. There is also, however, regulation as well, which governs accessibility for universities as well. The main regulation that covers the universities is the 2018 Public Sector Bodies Accessibility Regulations. Now, these are designed to make online public services accessible. Principally, you're talking about websites there, and of course, websites can include PDFs as well. So if you've got PDFs on your website, and they're created after 2018, then by these regulations, they must be accessible. And I'll be talking about what that actually means. What does it mean to be accessible? But it's also true that regardless of when your PDF was created, if a user requires that to access a service, then that PDF must be accessible no matter when that PDF was created. We also have an interesting new layer to the kind of accessibility regulations as well. So the European Accessibility Act is coming in to effect in June of this year. And that's going to apply to products and services brought onto the market from June 2025. Why would an EU regulation impact on British universities? After all, we're not in the EU anymore. Well, if you want to be involved with users who are in the EU, then this would be relevant to you as well. So, for example, recruiting students in the EU, or if you are making products available such as publications, I would also look at things like remote learning as well. We don't know the full impact of that. Obviously, it's not come into effect yet, and there's not been any test cases and things like that. But if you look at the legislation, then that's likely. We may also have legal parity with that in the UK. But as it stands, any UK organisation doing business in the EU will need to comply. So it covers electronic communication services, services that are providing access to audiovisual media services, also transport, banking, ebooks, and e-commerce as well. So there's a number of different areas there that could impact with the way that universities work. I'm just going to give a little example of some of these, of how some of this is enacted itself in law. Now, this is actually an example that doesn't come from the two bits of legislation I've already mentioned, but comes from another one, which is the Equality Act. This wasn't against the university, but it was against the Department of Work and Pensions. So in 2023, the High Court declared the DWP in breach of equality laws for failing to provide accessible information about benefits for blind and partially sighted people. Now, what had happened was they'd sent out letters to that particular service user, but they'd done it as a scan. So it was not accessible to people who are reading who use a screen reader in order to read that material. So the High Court ruled that the DWP had discriminated against blind and partially sighted people under that. So that's just an example of how you provide that information. It can have impacts that maybe you don't anticipate. Now, we know that there's a lot of challenges around document accessibility. So it's difficult to make sure that all your internal and external documents are accessible. What are the challenges? Well, sometimes you don't have any control over where those documents come from. They might come from, say, a third party, different organizations. So you can't always control it. People can use a variety of applications. They may not always follow the best practice in creating PDFs. So they might be scanned. They might be automatically generated, like by a form creation system, for example. They could be designed by all kinds of different tools that people have access to, because you can create PDFs from lots and lots of different places. And the reality is that the quality of those PDFs varies a lot, as does their accessibility. And if you need to remediate those documents, in other words, you need to make them accessible, then it takes a lot of time sometimes. It can be very time consuming, and it can be something that requires a lot of specialist expertise. So what actually does it mean to make a PDF accessible? And that's the first thing. And then I'll go on to, I'll actually show you, give you a bit of a demo of how you can do this across different products as well. So I've got a kind of picture of a document there, and this is really showing what the structure of that document is. So you can see that you have got the heading, for example. So when you create a PDF, to make it, the first stage of making it accessible is by giving it that structure. And it does that by tagging different elements within the PDF to describe what those elements are. That means that when you have a screen reader, it's able to identify those elements. So it knows what the title is, it knows what the heading is, what the paragraph is. So here we've got in this example, we've got a title, you can see, we've got headings, we've got a paragraph, you could have lists, you could have tables, you could have images, you could have all kinds of things within a document. Now, a properly accessible PDF will add a tag, not something you can see, but something that exists within the structure of the document, which will describe what that element is. So that is probably the first and most basic way that you need to make your PDF accessible. Without the tags, it can't be an accessible PDF. There are other things that go towards accessibility as well. Reading order. So some documents like the one shown here that would probably be fairly straightforward. But imagine you've got something like a magazine, an article that has got different columns, laid out across different areas. The reading order might not be all that obvious, and you would need to have that laid out in the PDF as well. The language that the PDF is in. If you've got a screen reader that needs to read out a PDF, then it needs to know the language that it's in. And I'll show you how to set these different elements as well. If you've got images, charts, graphs, infographics in your document, then they need to have alternative text for them as well, which describes what those images are. You've got to think about your tables, your links and references, your tables of content, your navigational aids as well. So these are all different elements that can impact on the accessibility of your PDF. So what are the best practices in creating a PDF? So good news is that in Adobe Express now, we have the ability to add accessibility tags. So let me show you that first of all. I'm just going to come out of here. I'm going to go into Adobe Express. So here's a document that I've opened up. It's just a CV from one of the templates. And if you want to create a PDF from this document, well, you just hit this download tag here, download button here, and you'll see you've got different options where you can download, but we're going to choose PDF. And you'll see we now have a section in there that says add accessibility tags. I download that document, and that's going to be an accessible and tagged document. Now, I would note that the add accessibility tags may not be on as a default. So when you do that the first time, make sure you select that add accessibility tags. It will then remember your preference for future dates so that each time you download it, then it will be accessible. So that's a great news about the Express, that you've got that option in there as well. Now we have also options from other applications as well. If you are, and probably one of the biggest products that you might be creating PDFs from would be Microsoft Office products. So you've got Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the ones that are commonly used every day. Now the good news is if you've got Adobe Acrobat and you've installed Adobe Acrobat on your PC or Mac, then you have got a PDF Maker button in every Microsoft Office application. Now, there's a few, and I'll show you this in a second, how that actually works. Word is actually one of the better applications to create a PDF from, because Word has a structure already within the document. So Word already marks out what a title is and all those other elements that I talked about. Because when you're creating these PDFs, it has to have something to work with in the first place, ideally. You can also, in Word, you can add your alt text. You can clearly label your tables. So the more accessible your document is to start with, and the easier it is to make sure you get a good PDF output. So let me show you this in Word. So I'll just come down and open Word. So here's my document in Word, and you'll see I've got all of my we've got all of my normal different tabs up here at the top where I would edit my Word document. Because I've got Acrobat installed, I've got this Acrobat tab here, and various things I can do in there, such as creating a link to share and things like that, or adding comments. Very, very useful things. But today I'm just going to focus on the PDF creation. This is a tool called PDF Maker. It has some preferences here. So if I click on the preferences, I'll show you the different things that can be done there. And you'll see that enable accessibility and reflow with tagged Adobe PDF is selected, and that is the default setting. So you don't have to change anything in PDF Maker. That will do that from a default. If you are interested in PDF Maker, you can do lots of other cool things, such as adding passwords to your PDF and adding security so that the PDF can't be changed and things like that. So these are all very useful things, but I'm just going to stick with the defaults there. I would just hit on Create PDF. It's going to open up my option here, and I'll just give that a number there. Just hit Save, and that's going to save my PDF. And this is now in Acrobat. So I've now opened up this PDF in Acrobat because it's automatically opened that up there for me. So has it worked? Is it a tagged PDF for a start? So I'm going to just open up the document properties. I just did that by hitting Control and D on my keyboard, or it would be Command and D on a Mac. And what am I looking for here? So it's opening up the document properties, and in there you've got a lot of what we would call metadata. So it's information about information about the document. Few things here, but the one we're interested in is right at the bottom where it says tagged PDF. So it says tagged PDF, yes. So we know that it is a tagged PDF, and it does have structure that lies beneath it, so that's going to give you the best output from a screen reader. So that's really good. Now, it's not the only thing, as we've seen already, that goes towards making a PDF accessible. So you can't just say, oh, this is a tagged PDF, so it's an accessible PDF. It's more accessible than an untagged PDF, which is completely inaccessible. But there may be other elements as well. I can see, for start, I don't have a title for this document. That would get picked up by any check on accessibility, which I can do, which I'll show you. Other things that are interesting might be worth pointing out here. You've got over here the Advanced tab, and if we're looking at the language that is set, then that's in here in this drop down here, and it has identified that as English. Now, if that wasn't correct, you can simply change that in there. Scrolling up and down there, you might notice there's a lot of languages in there, but there's not every single language in there. Example is there's no Welsh in there, and this is a question I sometimes get. I've got a Welsh language document that's incorrectly coming through as English. How do I make sure that the language metadata is correct in there? And you can simply just add that in there, and it's CY is the code. These are Unicode codes. You can there's available on Wikipedia and other places like that. You can go and look up all the language Unicode tags, and you can just add that in, and that would automatically, if I OK that would change the language in there. Now, that's not the language of my document, so I'm going to go back to English and OK on that. So that's a very simple way that you can create PDFs from Microsoft Office applications in such a way that they will be accessible. Now, that's good because it means that you can set a best practice. So going forward, all your PDFs that are going to be created will be as accessible as possible. So let me just go back to my presentation here. And I've showed you that where you've got the where you can check for the document properties. Now, how do you check for accessibility in PDFs? You might have no idea how your PDF has been created. You might not want to be doing kind of more manual things like looking into the document properties. So you can use the tools in Acrobat to check for accessibility. So there's an accessibility checker in Acrobat. And that will check the tagging, it will check the reading order, the alt text, color contrast, it'll check the language as well. And it'll also create an accessibility report for the document as well, which you can also have. You'll see in my screenshot here, you can see that this functionality, and all the other things you can do to fix those things if they're not right. So you can do things like set your alternate text, for example, set your reading order to. So let's have a little look at that within Acrobat. So come back to my PDF here that I just created. And I already know there's going to be a couple of problems with this document, but let's see what they might be. I'm going to come over here to my tools, and I'm going to choose Prepare for Accessibility. Oh, it's not the right one I should have done. Well, that is the right one, but that's the kind of main menu. And then once I'm in the main menu, I need to come down here. I need to choose Check for Accessibility. And this is going to give me all my options when I'm checking for accessibility. You can see it will create a report. It's going to tell me where the location of that report will be. I might actually just change that actually and move that to somewhere else. So I'll put it into there. You can choose to attach the report to the document as well. Otherwise, it's telling you all these different elements that are going to be checked. So you don't have to check them all, but really you probably do want to check them all. So let me start checking that there. Very quick, doesn't take long at all. It's only a couple of pages, this document. And I can see there's 3 issues have been discovered by the accessibility checker. And those are the logical reading order. That will always fail because it needs a manual check if you want to be really thorough about your accessibility. And again, color contrast on this needs a manual check as well. The title has failed. So I would need to put in a proper title for this to be fully accessible. And I would do that here in my document properties. I can just put the title in here. Okay on that. If I drill down to these other elements here, like the tables, the alt text, and so on, then I can see these have actually all passed because I did have alt text in my image. Now, if I did need to do additional things to it, then there is this option here to automatically tag the PDF. So if I had a PDF that had been badly created, it wasn't in a good shape, didn't have any tags, I can actually add, it will actually add in some tags for you. So you can do that. You can add alt text as well. So I can run that to just check for alt text, and I can see that it's coming up with what's already set for the alt text. You know, if I looked at that and decided it wasn't a good description, I could actually change that as well. Reading order we've got as well. And there's also a setup assistant, which is if you are a disabled user, it will enable you to set up Acrobat in the best way for you as well. So that is some of the ways in which you can check those things. Now, I keep talking about the tags and what they are and what they look like. So let's have a look at the tags. You'll see there's this little tagging icon over here. And this is what I'm actually talking about. So this is the structure of the document. It kind of lies, you know, it's part of the PDF, but it's not a visible part. It's just a metadata tag, which is describing the content of the document. So I can see, for example, this is a paragraph. I can see that this is a header 1 where it's got what is accessibility and education, and so on. So I can see all of my elements in there. I've got a list in here, for example, as well. So I've got all of those different elements, and I can edit those as well. So I can go in and I can right click on them, and you can see how it's opening up this area here. And I can go in there and I could remove a tag. I could make changes to the tags in there as well, and tag and make any changes that I wanted to make if I needed to do that. Sometimes there's some elements that can be really challenging. So the one that typically gets talked about is where people have tables in documents, and then they have subtables, and then sometimes they have subtables within the subtables because they've maybe used their table more as a kind of way of layout than as a way of, you know, putting things into a table. Sometimes those, if they don't get picked up when they're being tagged, from Word or from other applications, and if automatic tagging might not even reach those subtables, then sometimes those do need to be manually tagged, and that's where it gets a bit painful having to do that in there. But we have some other options as well, which I will talk about. Now, I'll maybe pause there because I've gone over quite a lot of technical detail before I start to talk about the next section. and I'll see if there are any questions that have come up in the chat, or if anybody wants to ask a question, they may also do that. Not sure if I see any in there.
Yeah,
Any questions?
Not had anything coming in, Alistair.
Yep, no problem. That's fine. So I will carry on then. Now, just come back to my my document here, Adobe Express presentation. And I've talked about the remediation, so the kinds of things that you can change. And I'll share this file with you as well as an accessible PDF, I should add. That you can change you can auto tag documents, that you can add alt text, you can check the reading order, the language. There's also a make accessible action, and that will actually run multiple different things within Acrobat to make a PDF more accessible. So if you're familiar with Acrobat, you can set up what's called actions, and there are default actions there for you. And these are just a number of tasks that are all kind of stuck together and added together, and you can run those actions to kind of do multiple tasks at once. So that's a way of making things a little bit easier. You can also automate those actions as well to some extent by, say, running an action on a whole folder of documents. Now, I talked about automation there, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. And some of the kind of more advanced tools that are available, because I guess there's two elements to making sure that you've got accessible content, within your university, and everything that you're providing is accessible in the way that it should be. One is to have best practice. So in other words, all PDFs that are created, people are told how to do it and what the best way to do it is in order to get a good, accessible document. The problem is that PDFs have been around for quite a long time. I mean, you're talking 25 to 30 years where you could have PDF content has been created, and much of that content is not going to be accessible. Now, at Adobe, we over the last few years, we've done something called a PDF health check, where we've worked with different companies, organizations, including universities, and we've done kind of spot checks on their publicly available PDFs in order to just see how healthy they were. And it's not great news, unfortunately, when it comes to accessibility. Typically, you would see up to around about 60 to 70% of PDFs not being accessible, which obviously is a big problem. And if you're dealing with, thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of documents, it's just not practical to manually make those accessible one at a time and go through Acrobat and check them and tag them and fix them. The time just isn't there, and people just don't have the staffing to cover that either. So there are solutions for that. So Adobe have got some what we call PDF services. Now, these are not part of the typical Creative Cloud. They're kind of an extra, if you like. So I need to make that clear at the start. But these can be used to automate some processes. I would say they're probably useful if you do deal with big volumes of PDFs. So it's not for smaller kind of amounts that you might be dealing with from time to time. But if you've really got a project to tackle maybe all of your backlog and history and archives of PDFs. So this is an API. So that means that it runs automatically and can be automated. And what it does is it basically uses machine learning or AI to auto tag PDFs. So it can do a couple of things. It can check for accessibility. So there's an accessibility checker API, which will simply check if a PDF is accessible. And there is also an auto tagger accessibility API. Again, that uses machine learning to automatically tag those PDFs. It actually does a very good job of it as well, and it does a better job on elements like tables than was the case in the past. You can build automated workflows with the API. So that means that if you have, new PDFs created internally, or if people are passing them on from a third party, you can make sure everything is tagged from the start, and you can also run it on all your existing archives of PDFs as well. You can integrate that using tools like Power Automate from Microsoft, or just with Python commands. We did pilot this recently with JISC, and they found that 3,500 files could be processed at around 10 seconds per file. So that was a huge time saver. We also worked on the outputs from that, and it was found to also save a lot of time because far less remediation was required on those documents. So let me show you a little bit about what that actually looks like, because when you talk about things like APIs, it's all a bit abstract. So I'm in Power Automate here. So this is just one of the Microsoft tools that's available, and you can access in a web browser. And in Power Automate, you can build something called flows, where you create actions with APIs. So I created an action here to say that when a file is created in a folder, and that's typically, say, a SharePoint folder, then it will do a number of actions that are contained within PDF services. So compress the PDF, create a tagged PDF, and I'm also going to linearize it. That's just a means of making sure that it downloads faster. I'm going to add security. You don't have to do these things, but it's just the extra steps that you can take. So to protect the PDF from being copied, edited, or printed. And then I'm going to create a file. In other words, I'm going to put that file into another folder. So you would have a kind of in folder and an out folder. So anything dropped in the in folder on a regular basis, that action would run, and then it would drop the outputs in an out folder. So that's just an example of how you can automate. I would say it's not for every organization that you'd want to do that, but if you really are, if you do have projects to really deal with these things at a big scale, then that is a great way to do it. Okay, so let me come back to my presentation here. Some other features that I'll talk about that we have within Acrobat. So with the mobile version of Acrobat, the Reader Mobile, then we have something called liquid mode. So now liquid mode it's one of these bits of technology. I think it was named as something like the Time Magazine bit of technology of the year, like last year or something. But it's like people don't really talk about it, and I don't think Adobe talk about it enough actually. But it's actually brilliant. What it does is it uses machine learning, uses the Adobe Sensei AI to analyze the structure of a PDF and to tag it on the fly, so that on a mobile device it will reflow so that it's easier to read. And that also means that it's accessible at the same time, or it's more accessible at the same time, because it has those tags added as well. There's other great things in there that you can do as well once you've got that on your document. So you can do things like set your preferred reading style. Now, when you're looking at things like different ways that people learn, or maybe even things like dyslexia, or other things that can cause people issues when they're trying to read, then we do know that the reading style, people have different reading styles. And being able to set your line spacing, your font size, etc., even the font that's used, and do that consistently across all your documents, can make for a better reading experience. And this is actually a project that we have, Adobe are involved in. We're one of the organizations involved in, called the Readability Initiative. And I think they describe it really well when they talk about reading as inclusive design, helping everyone be a better reader. What they found is that there's no one font that is a readable font, because people deal with fonts in different ways, and they perceive fonts in different ways. So for one person, a serif font might be more readable. For another person, a sans serif font might be more readable. So there are different types of readers, and once you can identify that, then you can set that consistently across all your devices in order to make it easier to read. So there's information there about the Readability Initiative. If you want to find out more about that, I just think it's a really interesting thing that we've been involved in. So that's really all I want to talk about today. The last thing here is really just some of the resources that are available. So I think there's some really good resources that we have available. So we've got a whole video series which is created by our accessibility team at Adobe. And it really, when I talk about in depth, it really goes in depth on PDF tagging. Like there's an hour on tables. There's, it's you want to know about this subject, I would definitely recommend. If you're a specialist and you're doing that kind of work, that's going to be really useful for you to reference that video series. We've got our documentation on document cloud accessibility. If the APIs are of interest to you, you can actually, for those APIs, by the way, you can actually get that as a trial version. You can sign up for a developer account, and you have, what it does is it doesn't time limit it, but it just limits the number of documents that you can process per month to try it out, basically. And we've got our API tutorials there if you want to find out more about that. Got a link there to the Readability Initiative. A couple of the kind of regulatory things at the end there on the public sector bodies accessibility regulations. And there's also an interesting article that JISC recently produced about the European Accessibility Act and what that is going to mean for higher education in the UK. And I know that they are having a in-person event about that in London coming up next month, I believe, as well. So if you're in London and you're interested, then check out JISC for that. So it's not an Adobe event, that's just something that JISC is doing. And that really wraps up what I wanted to talk to you today about Acrobat and accessibility. It is a huge topic, but I'm open for any questions that any of you have. So if you do, please feel free to drop that into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask me if you prefer, and I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. Good. I must have explained everything. I must have explained everything perfectly, so nobody has any questions. That's good. That's what I like to hear. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
I think Louise has been dropping in some of the links there as well, so that's great.
Yep.
Oh, can't unmute. Sorry, Helith. If you do want to ask a question in the chat, though, I'm happy to answer it. Yeah, Express. Absolutely. So I can go back to that again. So let me just come out of here. So if I'm in Adobe Express, so first of all, Adobe Express, if you're a creative campus, then that means all your students have access to Adobe Express. Also, all of your staff will have that access because you've got Creative Cloud licenses as well. Express is an online tool which you can access in a web browser, and you can use that you can create documents with it. And I've got a CV here as an example, which this is just a template. So there's thousands and thousands of templates in Express that you can use for PDF creation. Presentations, journals. I've known people who've created academic journals using Express, and they've collaborated on them internationally because using the translation functions and things like that. But once you've got your document in Express open, you'll see there's a download button over here. And this would be how you would normally get your PDF or even your JPEG or whatever it is that you need to get from Express. If I hit download on this, I choose my file format. I can choose there PNG, JPEG, PDF standard, or PDF print. So that's kind of, a version that's going to be good for printing. So let's even choose that, and I can add crop marks and bleed marks for the printing one. But I'll choose the standard one to get my tags. And you'll see that there's an option there that says add accessibility tags. you just need to make sure that is selected. Now, if I download that from there, I'll start to download it. Hopefully it won't take too long. Got my document here. So I'm going to go into Acrobat. I'm going to open that document up. Let's go here. And there is my document there. So that's the one that I just downloaded. And if I look at the tagged PDF, I can see, yes, it is tagged. As I said before, that's just adding tags and structure, which is the most important thing. But it's not the only thing that can make a document accessible. If you're missing alt text and things like that, you might also need to add those in as well. So have a look out for those other things and run your accessibility checker and so on. But yeah, you do have that. Yeah, no worries. Thank you. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to take those.
So one just come in, Alistair, asking, is accessibility a common issue within the UK only? And what about non-European countries?
Yeah, I mean, the non-European countries, I'm not sure about how the regulations apply. And I know in the US that you have got regulations that basically, so if you know the web standards, WC3 web standards, there are standards that apply to PDF as well. You know, Adobe are also, I know people that are involved in the review of those standards, for example, from the Adobe side. And in the US, there's I'm not a specialist on the US legislation, but there is legislation in the United States, for example, that will cover that. In other countries, it's not uncommon. I know, for example, I've worked with people in the Middle East. They tend to be somewhat similar regulations across other countries, but it will vary country to country what the regulations are. Is it a common issue? Yes, I would say so. I think the number of inaccessible documents that exist, it's not just PDFs, of course. I mean, websites and all the rest of it, there's massive, in apps, there's problems with accessibility as well. But we're only focusing on PDFs today. Yeah, it's a huge issue, I would say. And that's, something that I think it's great that there is legislation that's picking up on this and that's doing something about it. But I know at the same time there's a challenge to actually be compliant with the legislation. So hopefully some of the tools and best practices that we've talked about today will help people in those efforts. Okay. Great. Okay, if there's any other questions? We might be done with the questions.
I think nothing's coming through.
That's great. Stop sharing then.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alistair, so much. And if there's no more questions, we'll give everyone some time back on their afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us. Our next session, Alistair, keep me honest here, I think is next week. I think we have another
Thursday.
Was it Thursday? Thank you, Sue. Keep me honest. Yes, there's another on Thursday around creating presentations. So hopefully you can join us for that. Dawn, you're off to Adobe Max. Awesome. If anyone else is going there next, then enjoy. If you scroll back up on the chat, there's the registration for the Adobe Skills Lab if you want to join us for Thursday's session. And hopefully we'll see some of you there. Thanks so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.